Whenever I talk to doctors on a weekly basis about real estate, one of the biggest questions that they are asking me is, Jeff, how do you find the deals to invest in? And then one of the bigger questions is, when I find a deal, how do I know if it's a good one or not? And today's guest is going to tell us exactly how to do that. Plus, he's also a doctor as well. So, welcome to the show, Dr. Sam Giordano.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. I appreciate it. I followed you for a while and love your blogs and your videos. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and you and I recently were on we're on a virtual event together, and it was passive investing for the busy physician. And several of us, you and I included, kind of got together and said, hey, maybe we should further this education. And I saw the stuff that you're doing and the tool that you've created, which I'm really excited that you're going to get to share with our audience a little bit later on in this, how that actually works. But I was like, man, this guy, not only is he a doctor, he's a real estate investor, but he's created something to really help us people that are busy figure out if the deal's good or not. So that's cool. So, and you're a GI doctor in New Jersey, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Tell us a little bit maybe about your background and then how you went from probably your typical 401k, save and hope retirement plan to real estate investing.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. The and that's right. A lot of physicians, as you know, we're not really aware of this sort of real estate investing option or opportunity, and it's definitely. I mean, we're often, at least in the in the world that I came from, we're definitely not taught enough about personal finance in general. And then real estate investing, I look at is sort of like a second phase of personal finance that I think a lot of people should have as a part of their personal financial plan, their overall financial plan, especially once you get a few years out of training. So, like early on, I kind of, as you said, I was maxing out my retirement accounts, my 401ks. Our company offers a 457, which is sort of an additional pre-tax retirement option. I was doing the backdoor Roth IRAs. That's sort of a way to contribute to the Roth IRAs for those who sort of have taxable income above the limits for the Roth IRAs. And then we were sort of contributing to our children's 529s. And at that point, I kind of thought I had it set for the most part, but I felt like when I calculated how much pre-tax retirement savings I would have and what I would eventually need to retire, that I was still going to probably come up short with just investing in those particular investment options. So then as I got a few years out of training, paid off the student loans, and then we started to contribute to like a taxable or post-tax investing account to try to bridge the gap a little bit between what we sort of wanted to accumulate to try to save for retirement and then what we could with our pre-tax accounts. And so further along in that process, in around 2017 here in New Jersey, with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, when we lost the ability to deduct our state and local income taxes, my wife and I were both physicians, although my wife works about 3 days a week. We kind of got hit pretty hard from a tax standpoint. So I was talking to some of my friends and was like, man, I didn't realize how significant the tax hit could be. And then I started to come about in terms of real estate investing and real estate options. And that sort of sent me down the rabbit hole that started looking into initially like active investment options. But, for someone who still has a full-time job, I work pretty hard at it. I enjoy what I do. I over time, I realized it's probably going to be more like a second job. And I try to be mindful of trying to allocate my time appropriately. And that's sort of when I stumbled on passive investing into real estate and real estate syndications and been investing in there now for about 4 years. And it's been a great experience. And that's how sort of the advent of forming this type of tool for myself and then trying to sort of refine it to where others can use it from an education standpoint and be aware of some risk points and deals.
Excellent. So you said you've been doing it for about 4 years. So have you experienced any deals that have gone full cycle yet?
No, no, I haven't, believe it or not. The first two deals I invested in was like a fund. So Those were more on the 7 to 10 year time frame. Over the last, I would say, 2 years, I started investing only single asset deals. I don't really, I mean, unless it's in like the mobile home or self storage realm, I'm not as into the funds, and in the multifamily world, I'm mostly interested in the single asset deals, just because I feel like there's a value in terms of knowing when my capital is going to be deployed,
Hmm.
and then also a value to help me use analyzers like we have put together to vet the deal, and get a better idea of the tax implications. In funds, that gets a little more gray, although you get some diversification. Some of those other variables have made it slightly less desirable at this sort of phase of my real estate investing career, you know?
And currently, how many different sponsors are you invested with?
Currently, I'm invested in 12 deals with 7 different sponsors.
Okay. And while we're on the subject of sponsors, I don't know that, before it used to be kind of hard to find a deal, but so now, once you start signing up on these lists, you're pretty much inundated, as you know, with deals. So do you
Yeah,
have like a process that you go through as far as whether or not you should invest with a sponsor or not? Like, kind of how do you vet, how do you kind of do your due diligence on these groups?
sure. Yeah, so early on, I spent probably one whole year trying to educate myself on what to look for in syndications, and what syndications are, and what sort of the legal and tax ramifications are. And so, because a lot, and as you know, in a lot of these deals, some of the investment minimums can be pretty high. I didn't want to go in and put, you can get some of these deals through crowdfunding and some of those other websites where the minimums are lower, but then you're either looking for a sponsor that you're then looking at sponsors that may have a little bit of less experience, or may have more difficulty sort of raising the capital on their own. So it's not always the case, but sometimes those deals are either slightly higher risk or maybe slightly less desirable than some of the what's called the private placements, where you may have 25 or $50,000 minimum. So when I realized that some of the better deals had those kind of minimums, wanted to spend the year to like educate myself and get up to date on some of the metrics to look at. And in addition to that, that year I was listening to as many podcasts as I could, trying to be active on some of the real estate forums, and I came across a number of sponsors, and I would try to reach out to them, talk to them, ask them a couple of questions, and then get on their investor list. So, over time, you can quickly build up a lot of sponsors that you're in contact with. And as you said, nowadays I probably get 10 to somewhere in the 10 to 12 deals a week range. And that's, I always had, even when I first, during that first year when I was educating myself, I kind of put together an Excel sheet. Like, I don't know about you, but when I was in med school, I'm more of a visual learner. So if I was going through a class, I kind of had to either make like a cheat sheet for myself, or something that I could sort of consolidate the information on that particular topic. And then visually, it helped me to kind of learn better, both creating the sheet and then having a picture in my mind of what I wanted to kind of see, to then sort of remember things better. And so I went through that same process when I was learning through real estate syndications, but it was more in like an Excel sheet standpoint of like what metrics I want to look at. And then as I started talking with more sponsors, I then repeatedly reference that sheet to kind of go through the investment summary as it comes, and then look at those metrics in there and try to sort of correlate to what I'm looking for and what that particular deal had. And that's sort of that was sort of the advent of the LP deal analyzer that we created, is to kind of sort of refine that, and that has a ton of the metrics that we want to see in a deal, in an ideal world, although no deal is going to meet all those criteria.
Right. Well, do you have like a certain criteria as far as do you have certain areas of the U.S. that you want to invest in, certain asset classes? Because I know a lot of times people start and it's like, well, I mean, you probably hear this too from these new investors. Yeah, I want passive income. That's pretty much all
Yeah,
they say. And there's like, okay, well, there's a lot of places that you could go get passive income, or
yeah,
So, kind of walk us through a little bit about maybe what you look for personally, and kind of how you, uh, maybe recommend somebody that's just getting started, how they maybe set some goals for them for their
Yeah.
investments.
Yeah, no, makes a ton of sense. And I think I try to network just like we're doing now, and at the recent sort of video conference that we had, that for passive income for physicians. I try to network with as many passive investors as I can to kind of be able to talk about these things together. Like, what sponsors have you invested in? What sponsors? Here's some sponsors I invested in. This is my experience. I think there's a lot of power in that for people who are in similar positions where we've invested in these deals. And unfortunately, there's too many physicians that don't know anything about this. So it's hard to find some people who are in exactly a similar position. But I think the number one thing in terms of looking for sponsors is trying to get some word of mouth and other people's experience for me, in that, I know those investors are doing what I'm doing. They have no ulterior motive. They have no other reason to recommend them other than just giving their honest experience. And so I think that's the number one thing in finding sponsors is now that I have sort of a network of colleagues and friends who've invested in some of these deals, and some deals I have and some deals I haven't, is to sort of compare and contrast and figure out what sponsors are recommended by them. And then the second thing is, once you speak with a sponsor, some of the biggest things you want to ask for is a track record. Now, when you do that, a lot of sponsors will send you some sponsors may not have any full cycle deals, and they only can kind of give you where the performance is now. But if you have, ideally, in our tracker sheet, we in our sort of deal analyzer, we like to see a sponsor that has at least 3 full cycle deals.
Mhm.
It's not exactly, there are situations, if somebody's, if the risk benefit ratio is there, that I'll invest in someone even if they don't. But in an ideal world, you have a sponsor that has at least 3 full cycle deals. And then when you ask for the track record, I like to ask for the metrics of what the performance stated versus what was actual. And sponsors won't always give you that. So a lot of times they'll just give you what the performance was, and usually they'll go either cash on cash or an annual return, and then maybe an IRR and an equity multiple of that deal, and they won't give you what it was versus the pro forma. But I like to, especially if someone's had full cycle deals, I like to see the compare and contrast in terms of what the performer was and what the actual was.
So
Um,
what you're saying is for new people. So I personally had 3 deals go full cycle last year, and man, it's really cool. I mean, that really starts to snowball you, because you're able to just take all that money and just deploy it. But so what you're
yeah,
saying is, so what I did on those deals was I went back to the original, all the underwriting, all the original paperwork
yeah,
from those deals, and I looked like you were talking about. Okay, here's what our projected IRR is. Here's what our projected cash on cash with all that, and then looking at what the actual return is. Is that kind of what you're saying to do?
yeah, that's exactly right. I think, and it's ideal. So say you weren't invested in the deal, then in this case, if you're invested in the deal, you're able to do that and get the numbers. But in an ideal world, the sponsor will have that information if they've had previous full cycle deals, where they can show you what it's been, and how many. I don't expect every deal to overperform, but if there are some deals that did underperform, that then opens up a question point for the sponsor as to what happened with that deal, and what are they doing now going forward to mitigate that risk. So in terms of the sponsor, there's not as many metrics as you would look at in like the actual deal information, but I still feel as if the sponsor is the most important component of the evaluation, because that they can really make or break a deal.
Yeah, that's for sure. And like you said, we're kind of all bonded together, and I think it's really important. The more people that invest and they have good relationships with sponsors and they have good relationships, I think we should spread the word, because if not, I mean, as you know, look at the burnout rate in the healthcare profession, especially after
Yeah,
COVID. It's over 50% now. So we have to help each other and share the news. I mean, I've got people here. I mean, I had a text this morning from an orthopedic surgeon that I was telling him about. He was asking me about some of the returns that you could get. I said, look, here's the deal that I had, and it was supposed to go. It was projected for a 5-year hold. It was a multifamily, I think, in North Carolina, and I did it in 2019. I invested in it in 2019, self-directed IRA, projected 5-year hold. It was, I think, it projecting like 70% overall return, and it sold in 26 months. He was like, "You made 70% on your money in 26 months." He's like, "How is that possible?" I was like, "Well, that's the kind of thing we have to tell people that, hey, look, I'm just telling you what I got. I'm not, some sort of
Yeah.
person trying to pitch you anything or whatever." And then it kind of opens them up to, hey, there's possibilities. So with
Yeah,
that
it's
being said,
amazing. I agree with you.
so with that being said, would you mind if, you're talking about your deal analyzer, and I'm really curious about that. Would you mind maybe kind of walking us through or showing us a little bit about how that works? But
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to.
so whenever somebody gets a deal in their email box and they're wanting to know,
Hmm.
is this deal good or not? Let's say it's just an apartment and they get all these numbers and, all these projections of what the income is, what the expenses. And so what you're saying is we can take that information and use that to plug into what you're going to show us. Is that correct?
Yep,
Okay,
that's exactly right.
perfect. Because whenever we get a deal in our inbox, we have to go on it based on what the sponsor gives us, and we have to just take that like, okay, well, that's their projection. That's what they think our cash flows are going to be. That's what they think that we're going to make in this deal. Maybe it's a 1.8 equity multiple, meaning if we put 100,000 in a deal, whatever the hold period is, we're going to make, we'll get $180,000 back. So
Hmm.
what you have is going to help with that. So yeah, I'm really excited to see, and I'll put the links below this video for you guys. So if y'all want to check this out, if y'all want to go see what Dr. Sam has, I'll make sure I get everything from him and just make it easy. Just click below this video.
Yeah, sounds great. So our website is passiveadvantage.com, and this actual tool is called the LP Deal Analyzer. And sort of we tried to make it as sort of a one-stop shop for limited partners like you and I, where
Mhm.
they have a lot of different a lot of different things that we want to kind of track as a limited partner. So if you look at sort of the dark inputs here are mostly deal specific. And then there's a separate section on LP deal tracker, which we'll briefly go over, and that sort of tracks your own investment so you can keep track of the performance. And then there's a path to financial independence tracker, which you can plug in this iteration of the LP deal analyzer. Probably within the next 4 to 6 months, we're going to come out with a second version. You plug in sort of hypothetical metrics to see how long it would take you to become financially independent. But in the new iteration
Mhm.
down the road, it's going to actually integrate your LP tracker of your actual investments alongside of your hypothetical to see where you are on that track.
Yeah,
So
that's
those are
cool.
sort
And
of
I
separate.
don't think there's really much, there's these compound interest calculators out there, but I've always said, hey, and I've asked these sponsors, can you give us
Yeah,
something to where if we put X amount of money in a deal every year, kind of like these
yeah,
compound interest calculators, and there's nothing like that out there. So this is really cool. This is kind of what I was, years ago wanting to get, and they're like, well, we can't do that or whatever. So the
yeah.
software that you have, this is more kind of like a simplified way to underwrite a deal? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, so basically, so we have a bunch of different tabs, and the way we've organized it here is this key inputs tab is sort of the brains of the rest of the sheet. And each of these, the top part of this key inputs goes in terms of instructions of what you would do in each of the sheets, so that it's pretty broken down in terms of what you need to do and what you don't need to do. But if you scroll down here, the blue areas that are outlined in this sort of teal blue is where you input information. So you can see like this is sort of a hypothetical deal, 50,000 investment, your projected returns based on your investment summary. You put that in here. And this is just sort of notes you can make to yourself depending on where it is. And the way I usually do this, because this is an Excel file, is that when you order the LP deal analyzer, it comes as a base, and then for each deal I do, I'll create, put it into the sheet, and then I'll save it as a separate file so that I have that on the deal, and I can kind of go back and look at it depending on if I invested in it or not. These metrics where you see the addition here are taken from the next sheets, which are the basic and advanced, which actually group in the actual terms we're going to talk about, and we'll go over that in a second.
Mhm.
But in this particular deal, you could see in terms of the values, the sponsor, the market, and the deal. This particular deal achieves 75% on, again, in relation to the sponsor, the market, and sort of you can form your own criteria as to what is acceptable for you once you start seeing more and more deals in there. And this just presents that information in sort of a pie chart form and how much they didn't achieve the unawarded points. And so this section sort of summarizes some of the other components of the sheet if you wanted to get an all-in-one quick look at it. But you see there's not any manual input here until you go down to this next section where the cash flow projections, which you would get from the investment summary that the sponsor sends, where it's typically, your general investment amount and then what the cash flow is and then what the projected sale, for example. This is all, you just take this directly from the investment summary and plug that in.
Mhm.
And then in addition, you oftentimes may not get the purchase cap rate, but you can do it based on the using the net operating income and then the exit cap, and you can calculate the cap rate. So that's why the purchase cap here is not in blue, it's in yellow there. So that calculates it based on the figures, because oftentimes sponsors won't give you that. They'll give you the exit cap, which is, so you put that information in, and this is once again all in the investment summary, the loan to value, the
Mhm.
purchase price of the property. And then you go down to the waterfall section. If there's a pref, you put that in, and then if there's a hurdle after that, in this case it's a 70-30 hurdle.
Just excuse me just a second. So just for you guys that aren't really familiar with the preferred return and the different waterfalls, so can you explain that for
Yeah, thanks for that's a good point, Jeff. Some people may not be familiar. So a lot of deals will have what's called a preferred return, where the limited partner gets a certain return before there's any distributions to the sponsors or anyone else. So you know you could look at it. I've invested in one deal that doesn't have a preferred return, but I generally like to see the preferred return in that it sort of gives limited partners an edge. And I think in some ways they deserve this, because they are putting, although the general partners are doing a lot of due diligence to find the deal and putting in the upfront cash and that whole thing, and whether there's money up front, but the limited partners are putting in a lot of the equity, if not most of the equity in the deal. Um, so I do like to see deals that have a preferred return where the limited partner gets a set percentage before anyone else does. So in this case, this particular deal has a 7% preferred return.
Mhm.
And then the next phase, what's called like a waterfall, is that the limited partners in this deal get 70% of the overage. So say the deal makes 10%, then 70% of that sort of extra 3 percentage points will go to the limited partner and 30% will go to the sponsor. And in some cases, there's like a hurdle on that. So, for example, they may say 7% preferred return and then 70-30 up till a 15% IRR hurdle. So, if that were the case, you then change this number to 15, and then it goes to 50-50 split
Mhm.
instead of a 70-30, then you would change that there. So, this section is a 70-30 throughout. So that's why it stays,
Okay.
all these numbers stay the same, because the 70-30 doesn't change. But that's how you would do that. So, and then here you see some of the fees, and a lot of these things you'll see in the investment summary, such as an acquisition fee, an asset management fee, disposition fee, the projected hold. And all this information in this key inputs page is garnered from the investment summary. So this is where most of the manual inputs of this whole sheet goes. So once you get this information in, there's not a lot more you have to do in terms of the basics of the deal itself. And then from this key inputs page, this general partner alignment tab and the IRR partition are auto-populated and to the point where you don't have to do anything at all anymore. That takes it from the key inputs tab. So this is something that I wanted as a limited partner, and I couldn't find this type of sort of graphical representation. But the yellow or the orange curve represents the limited partner returns as the net operating income increases, and the green line represents the general partner returns. So I tend to look at the crossover point here. So the more favorable the deal is, the crossover point shifts to the left.
Okay.
So I like to see it somewhere between 15 to 20%. If it's like 30%, then it's definitely not a favorable deal for the limited partners. And this takes into account other metrics that we put in and looks at the property level returns before you even split off the fees versus what the limited partners is told. So you can then look at this overall dilution, which is what the general partner takes away from the limited partner during that course. And so in general, we would like to see this number. You can see if you highlight over, whether if it's a core property, 1 to 3%, if it's a value add, 3 to 6, if it's an opportunistic or ground up, 6 to 8. So this deal is 8.9. So it's a little higher. The sponsors are taking a little bit more off the top than we like to see. And this information was taken from what you put in this key inputs page. So I'll stop there for a sec, Jeff, just in case you have any questions about that general partner alignment graph.
So what this kind of is, so like if you went to a financial planner and you're putting money in with them and 401ks and all this, so what this is kind of doing is, because they start sending you all these statements of, oh yeah, I'm making money every month, but you have no idea all the different fees that are taken out of the mutual
and what
fund.
they're making, yeah.
What they're making. So what this is telling us is what we're being told we're going to make, but it's also telling us what the sponsor in reality is getting over the course of the whole period. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, based on the fees and the waterfall structure that was inputted on that prior key inputs tab.
Okay.
And then the second auto-populated sheet is what's called an IRR partition. And this is really powerful, something to look at as a limited partner, where in general, the riskier the deal, the more this IRR partition breaks down the internal rate of return, which is one of the main metrics you look at as a limited partner. And in general, most multifamily deals these days are somewhere in that 14 to 16% annually. But what percentage comes from cash flow from the deal versus what percentage is calculated based on the final sale that you're going to the proceeds you get from the sale. So I in general like to see a cash flow percentage. So if you sort of see in this particular deal, the cash flow percentage is 24%, whereas the sale proceeds are 75%. I like to see the cash flow at least somewhere around that 25%. If the cash flow is 10% and the sale proceeds is 90%, then you're banking a lot at time of the sale. And there's not a lot of cash flow you're getting during that return period. And that's based on these metrics that are auto-populated from, once again, that key inputs tab in terms of your annual cash flow. So I like to see deals that are at least have a good close to 25% based on the return metrics from cash flow as opposed to that final sale price. And this IRR partition gives you that, gives you those breakdowns and that number so you can kind of see what that is. So that's another, and the overall form of this sheet is I like to tell people that it's not so much about what deal to invest in, although you use information from it to garner which deals you want to invest in. It's really to educate you on what some of this stuff people may be hearing for the first time, and that's what our goal is, to try to educate people what they need to what terms they should be familiar with and what things they should be looking at. And so the big purpose of the sheet is to help with the education process in terms of knowing what you don't know, that goes into the nuts and bolts behind the scenes of the deal and some of the metrics you should be looking at. And then the second thing is to alert people to risk points. If there's certain things that are clear red flags, then you could then decide, do I want to still invest in this deal? Do I not want to invest in this deal? And sort of that the next sort of component will help to go over that in a little more detail. But I want to stop there, Jeff, just to see if you have any additional questions on what we've discussed so far.
I think that's pretty self-explanatory. That's good that you're showing that you're getting people, hey, you're getting distributions over, this 5-year period, but then you're actually banking on the sale. And that's how we get that IRR. So that's good that you're breaking that down visually so they can see that.
Yeah. So then once you get that key input stuff, information in there, we have sort of a basic and advanced tab, which when you actually get into the nuts and bolts of the deal, and a lot of this stuff where there's these asterisks are auto populated from the key inputs page. So any data we could auto populate where you don't have to manually put in, that's where these double asterisks in front of it. So you
Mhm.
don't have to touch anything there. So so the basic tab is sort of the salient features of the deal that we like to look at. And the advanced tab is the same as the basic, but it just adds in this, and highlighted in purple here, some additional metrics that for people want to get a little more granular or get into a little more detail, where a lot of times I'll just use the basic. Unless I'm really on the fence, then I may go to the advanced and populate some of these other metrics in there. So the nice part about the sheet is, for example, this is it a landlord friendly state? So you can see here it came in no. So that goes based on where you inputted the deal, what state you're investing in. So that's information that automatically gets populated in there. And then as you go down, this is stuff that you would, in this case, in terms of the market, we reference areas where you can look up what the population growth is, and then pull on a drop down and place it into that. And then that turns the cell red, green, or yellow, depending on what that population growth is in that particular market.
So
So
we go look it up ourselves. Is that what you're saying?
in this iteration of the sheet, the goal is to get it integrated that with the next iteration of the sheet, to where it goes by, if you, in this key inputs page,
But
you put in a
at least
zip
that's
code.
teaching us to look to, hey, let's go look at this city, which most people probably just say, Dallas, Texas, or whatever, and take that for granted.
Yeah.
At least it's making you think, hey, how much population growth? Is it a landlord friendly state? So that's good. You're getting us to think about the deal.
Yeah, and then through, as you highlighted, it kind of references where you would go to look. In this case, city data. So the big metrics market wise is that we look at is the population growth, the median household income,
Mhm.
what the crime rate is in that area, what the job growth is in the prior 12 months. And then once you look that stuff up, like I said, in this iteration, you have to do it manually. But the goal is on further iterations to where you put in a zip code in the key inputs, and this stuff comes in automatically. But these are the biggest metrics from the market, whether there's good schools there, what the rent growth is in that area has been. So that's sort of summary of the market metrics, and I can certainly go on to discuss a couple more, Jeff, but I didn't know if you had any questions in relation to the market metrics in particular.
No, that's good.
And you could see as you put in those metrics, it kind of adds up the score. So the total is opportunity is 300. In this case, it's a 202. So it's pretty good market score for this particular metro. And then the next category is the sponsor, where we talked about a lot of these things. How many full cycle deals? In this case, it's 0 to 2, 3, 4, 5 plus. So I said I'm at minimum I like to see the 3, and then you can see how different changing different metrics here changes the colors of those cells. So
Mhm.
if there is a red flag point, it turns the cells red to kind of something you either want to decide not to invest, or you can talk to the sponsor about and ask them. Now, this one category, Jeff, you probably would disagree with, because it sounds like you invest through a self-directed IRA, but a lot of my investments are through post-tax accounts. So certain sponsors have a higher percentage of investors who invest through a pre-tax or a self-directed IRA account versus those who invest through a post-tax account. So some of the tax benefits and some people do both. So some of the tax benefits of the deals such as cost segregation and bonus depreciation and being able to take losses early on in the deal are most realized in post-tax investing accounts. So for sponsors who have a large percentage of their investor base that invest through self-directed IRA, they may be less likely to try to maximize the tax advantages. So that's why I have this as a risk point. But this assumes someone who's investing in a tax post-tax account and not a self-directed IRA account. So this is sort of somewhat egocentric, and that's why that turns that number red. You can in terms of the deal, as you break down here, you can see there's a lot more metrics, and this breaks down, in my opinion, the 5 main categories you want to look at in a deal: the property or market assumptions. For example, what the planned bonus depreciation is in this particular deal, what the what the expense ratio is. The debt details is a huge portion of the risk point of the deal, especially right now in this current economic market. The return metrics in terms of to the limited partner, the income and rent score. Some of the big things are what the projected rent growth is in the deal, and then the sponsor fees. So as you can see, looking at the deal itself, although undoubtedly the sponsor is the most important, but the deal has the most objective or quantifiable metrics you can then break down and go through a lot of things, to see what you should be looking at in the deal. So I want to stop there, Jeff. I don't know that we have time to go through all these deal metrics, but I'm happy to elaborate on something in more detail if you'd like me to, or go through however relation to the deal.
Usually you just get an investment summary and you just have to kind of go, okay, you're taking the sponsor's word. Is this a good deal or not? And this is something just to take it to a higher level. One thing that I would like to do before we end, if you don't mind, if you have time, is to, I'm curious, do you have anything regarding the path to financial independence, or is that something you said was in the future at the bottom?
No, we have that now. Yeah, we definitely have that now. And one thing I will mention, Jeff, and I think something that would be revolutionary to how we look at deals, is that, as you know, like when we get investment summaries, on average, these are like 40 to 50 page documents that you get. And if we're at the level where you and I are at, where we're investing in a lot of these things, you get 10 to 12 of those a week. I'm at the point where I can go through them pretty quick now, but it still takes me probably a good 20 minutes to go through those. Whereas back then, when I first started, maybe it was an hour each. So the goal is, if there was a way to get the sponsors to pre-populate this sheet with information from their deal, where somebody would maybe get the investment summary, but then also get sort of a one-page sheet to kind of look at like this to see where the metrics are. I mean, you have to do your ultimate due diligence on your own, but you may not have to go through all the granular details of those sheets to find this information, where you can quickly look at it, boom, look at it in 2 minutes and have an idea of all the metrics that are salient. The goal is to eventually get it to a point where some sponsors are willing to put it in this kind of form, and where it could then be presented to investors in a more easily readable format in a more efficient way. So that's sort of a little tangent, but that's the vision that down the road, I think, would be a game changer for people like busy physicians that want to look at these things fast.
The 2.0 version, huh?
Yeah, exactly. So the two sort of sidecar components that come with the sheet, the LP tracker. So this is where you have sort of, an individual deal, and in this case you can compare up to 5 of the deals that you have, and then you can see, the states your commitment date, how much you invested. And you can see, once again, through the theme of the whole sheet, the only piece you put in is manually, it runs in the blue. And then you can see on this side of it what the planned IRR is versus what the actual is. And so to get that information, you go down a little further. And like, for example, this first deal, in the blue, you would put in what your distributions are. So in this case, if this deal is a monthly distribution or a quarterly distribution, and that goes based on the distribution schedule, where you can change it in here, it then pre-populates a sheet that goes monthly, and then you put your distribution amount. So if it's zero, it's zero, and then automatically the metrics are calculated what your rolling returns are versus what they were projected to be. And then you could see at the bottom here, it looks at your overall portfolio and what your annual cash flow is projected versus actual, and then what your overall portfolio returns on your whole portfolio of limited partner investments, what your overall is versus what the actual and projected is. So this is something that I wanted as a limited partner that, as you said, I couldn't really find.
Hmm.
And then down low, when you go to the portfolio diversity, it sort of breaks it down: multifamily, self class A, multifamily class B, self storage, what geographical region, Northeast, Southeast, Texas, different areas, broken down graphically. So this is sort of a depiction of some of the deals. And in this iteration, it goes up to 15 deals, but down the road for people, I think most people that sort of touches, but that gets everything they need. But down the road, we want to add more ability to put more deals in there. And then the last thing that you reference is the path to financial independence. So if you look here, Jeff, where the blue cells are, this is just a sort of a standard annual cash flow projection. You can change this to 6. I have in here 8, and the average equity multiple on the deals, and your average annual of new capital that you invest annually. So in here, this is sort of on average what my projections would be for myself. Like my goal is to invest in 2 to 4 deals a year, and so I put here 100,000. So, and then here you put in what your current monthly basic living expenses are to cover your rent, your food, your bills, stuff like that, and then your lifestyle living expenses, which includes maybe a nicer car, vacations. So in this example, I use 96,000 as the basic and 120,000 as the lifestyle annual expenses, and this breaks it down annual and monthly. And then I put in here too inflation, although right now it's a little bit, this number may be different than what it was. But so if you look here, the orange sort of line tracks the lifestyle. The basic line is below. So you could see with these assumptions, without taking into consideration any sort of equities or stock market investing, this is just using real estate, you would reach financial independence for basic at year 7. And you would reach financial independence for lifestyle at year 8, assuming you reinvest all these assets, or you reinvest proceeds and you don't use it for your lifestyle.
Does it matter
When I
what the
first saw,
hold period is on these, because different deals can have different hold periods. So does it account for that?
yeah, so it doesn't account for hold periods because this is only based on your return metrics, 8%
Okay.
cash flow. So if you're investing in a deal, Jeff, and you get 15% return on that deal, this gets truncated even sooner. This is only assuming 8% cash flow annually.
Okay.
So you could see how this is even a conservative estimation for these kind of investments. So when I saw this sheet and saw how quickly you could achieve financial independence, although granted 100,000 isn't a small amount to invest annually, in
Right.
7 to 8 years versus what we're taught, the typical financial independence, you multiply your expenses by 25 for 4% rule, or 33 by 3% withdrawal rate in the basic equities. You may have to work 20, 30 years to get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you invest this amount in some of these syndications, assuming a conservative 8% return or a 2x multiple over, then you could see, I believe this assumes a 5-year hold, Jeff. Let me just double check here. Yeah, I think this assumes a 5-year hold on that. But you could see how profound it can be when you're investing in some of these deals consecutively and using the proceeds to reinvest in new deals.
Yeah, that's like I was telling you early on, that's what I'm starting to see now. Just, you're doing this so much every year, and then when you get one go full cycle, it's like boom, it's like a catalyst, and
Yep.
that's really exciting when you start seeing that. Kind of like the Dave Ramsey debt snowball, yet it's kind of going more towards your investments instead of paying off debt. Gets
Yeah.
you're paying off a little debt, and then after a few years, all that money is going toward this. Like, whoa, I can really pay these off quick, and this is like, whoa, I can really accelerate my path to financial independence.
If you are also investing in the equities market or the stock market, and you take that into consideration, I
Hmm.
mean, you could quickly see how it kind of snowballs. And to sort of echo what you said about, I work at a hospital that has about 700 physicians, and I've had countless people come up to me over this last year and a half with COVID, and kind of people wanting to cut down the 4-day work week or 3-day work week, and how burnt out they are, and wanting to learn more about these things. And so, even if I often tell people, even if they want to continue to work in exactly the way it is, having the ability to know that it's not like I have to work, but I want to
Hmm.
work, and making that choice is sort of a liberating thing that, even though I'm not quite there yet, that I've seen, even though I'm partially there along the way, when you have other cash flow coming in from these other sources.
Absolutely. Well, man, I really appreciate your time. And like I told you guys that are watching this or listening to this, I'm going to put all of Dr. Sam's links below this video. You can check out his website. You can check out his deal analyzer. Hopefully, you'll pick that up. That's something really cool, and I really like that visual financial independence part of it too. So that's awesome. So if somebody wants to, besides your website, if somebody wants to reach out to you or contact you, find out more, maybe ask you some more questions, how do they do that?
Yeah, so I'd be happy to help any way I can. You can reach me at, my email is sam@passiveadvantage.com.
Okay.
So please feel free to email me, reach out, and I'm happy to help in any way I can. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity for having me on, Jeff. Like I said, I've loved what you do, and I really sort of get a lot from your content. So thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Yes, sir.